The following audiobook is intended for mature audiences and contains graphic language, adult content, and violence. It is also based around the universes of Has-Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss. Other characters that may appear or get mentioned belong to their respective owners/creators. Not recommended for listeners below the age of 18. Listener discretion is advised. Spades, written by Nerdy Kai and Goofball Dubs. Cover art by Opal Malow.
Chapter 2. The alarm clock on the nightstand went off, piercing the calm that greeted the early morning. Rue groaned, her eyes fluttering open to greet the day. The room was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, the curtains dancing in the breeze from the open window. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her tail flicking with the motion. The floor was cool under her hooves, a stark contrast to the warmth she'd been nestled in. It had been a few weeks since she had met Alfie, and the two had gone out on several outings as friends. Rue shuffled into the kitchen, the scent of sugar and flour lingering from her late-night baking spree. She'd spent hours perfecting a new recipe, the kind that could only be found in the depths of the hellish pantry she called home. Her eyes fell on the note that had become a fixture on her fridge, a simple piece of paper with Alfie's number scribbled on it in his messy handwriting. A smile played on her lips as she thought of their first encounter, the way his horns had glinted in the streetlights and the charm that had wrapped around her like a warm blanket. With a sigh, she filled the kettle with water and placed it on the stove. While waiting for the water to boil, she pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Alfie's number. It was now or never. Her heart skipped a beat as she sent the text. "Hey, Alfie. Hope you're doing well." Her phone buzzed almost immediately, the sound jolting her out of her spiraling thoughts. It was Alfie. "Hey, Rue. I was wondering if I could swing by your bakery today. Maybe grab some of those amazing treats you talked about?" His message brought a warmth to her chest that the brewing tea couldn't match. She quickly responded, "I'd love that." Rue hurriedly finished her breakfast, a mix of sugar-coated strawberries and a hastily toasted bagel, the sweetness a perfect start to the day that was shaping up to be more exciting than she'd anticipated. While on the bus, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling in her stomach. Alfie had never been to her bakery before, and she wanted everything to be perfect for his visit. She pictured his eyes lighting up at the sight of her creations, the delicate pastries and devilishly sweet concoctions that were the pride of Rue's delights. As she stepped off the bus, the smells of the Gluttony Ring wafted towards her, a cacophony of sweet and savory that made her stomach rumble. She quickened her pace, the cobblestone streets leading her to her small shop, nestled between a demonic tattoo parlor and a salon that specialized in horn trimming. Rue unlocked the door with the jingle of the bell, the chilly air of the morning giving way to the warmth of the ovens that had been working tirelessly through the night. The counters gleamed with freshly baked goods that were both sinful and heavenly. Her mind raced as she put on her apron, tying the strings into a neat bow. What would Alfie think of her bakery? Would he love it as much as she did? The thought of him walking through the door sent a shiver down her spine. As she began to set out the pastries for the early morning customers, she couldn't shake the feeling that today was going to be a good day. Later in the day, the store had filled up with a few customers going about their early afternoon with their orders. The bell on the door jingled, and Rue looked up expecting to see a regular, but instead her heart skipped a beat as Alfie stepped into the bakery, a bouquet of roses in one hand and a shy smile on his face. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the pastel colors and sugared decorations that adorned the walls and shelves. She felt a strange mix of pride and vulnerability as he approached the counter. The bouquet held out to her with a flourish. His cheeks were a faint shade of pink that matched the roses perfectly. Taking the bouquet with a gasp, he shrugged with a cheeky grin. His eyes sparkled with mischief as he leaned on the counter, taking in the heavenly scents of the freshly baked goods. Alfie scanned the display with a thoughtful look, his gaze lingering on the sugar-drenched donuts that were shaped like little demons. "I'll take one of those," pointing to a donut with a charming grin that made Rue's heart flutter. As she placed the treats in a box, she hoped her nervousness wasn't showing. "Here you go," she said, sliding the box across the counter. Alfie took it with a gentle nod of his head, his eyes never leaving hers. Rue's cheeks flushed as she rang up his purchase. Alfie said with a wink, "I heard there's a certain demon baker here who makes the best sweets in the city." Rue's heart thumped in her chest, her cheeks burning as she tried to play it cool. Alfie leaned in closer, his eyes full of warmth. "Only the best for the best," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The customers in the bakery had thinned out, leaving just the two of them in the sweet-scented sanctuary. Rue's heart raced as Alfie took a seat at the small table by the window, the light casting a halo around him. She brought over a cup of tea, the steam rising in a gentle dance that mirrored the swirl of emotions inside her. As they talked, Rue found herself relaxing into the conversation, their shared laughter echoing off the walls. Alfie spoke of his job at the record store, and Rue regaled him with tales of her most challenging cake orders. Time flew by as they sat there, the sweetness of the pastries mixing with the bitter tang of the tea. Alfie's eyes lit up with every story she told, and Rue felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the warmth of the drink. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, Rue knew she'd have to start closing up the shop soon. The thought filled her with a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. He took a bite of the demon donut, the sugar coating his teeth briefly. She had to admit she was surprised by Alfie's interest. Most demons she knew didn't care about the little things in life, but Alfie was different. He had a way of making everything feel important. "Well, I'm just a simple demon with a love for baking." He leaned in, his eyes earnest. "You bring joy to people's lives with your creations. That's a kind of magic not everyone has." The sincerity in his voice made Rue's heart flutter. She leaned closer, her eyes locked with his, and for a moment, the world outside the bakery ceased to exist. The scent of roses and freshly baked goods mingled in the air, creating a heady atmosphere that made her feel lightheaded. Alfie leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a sweet, chaste kiss that stole her breath away. It was over almost as soon as it began, leaving her feeling both elated and craving more. Rue's eyes remained closed for a beat longer, savoring the sensation. When she opened them again, Alfie was smiling at her, his eyes full of affection. She couldn't help but return the smile, her own heart feeling like it was floating on a cloud. "Thank you for the roses," her voice barely above a whisper. He took another bite of his donut, watching her as he chewed. "So, do you have any plans for tonight?" The question caught her off guard. Not really," she replied. "I usually just close up here and head home." "How about dinner?" Alfie suggested, his voice filled with hope. She nodded, her eyes still fixed on him. Alfie's smile grew wider. "It's a date, then," he said, standing up from his chair. Rue felt a mix of butterflies and nerves fluttering in her stomach. "I'll pick you up at 7, Alfie said, getting up from his seat and giving her a wink that sent her heart racing. The bell on the door chimed again as he left. Rue stared at the spot where he'd been, the taste of his kiss still on her lips. As the clock approached closing time, Rue began to feel the weight of the impending date, placing the last few goodies in the display case with extra care. She hadn't felt this nervous since her first day at the baking academy, but it was a good kind of nervousness, filled with excitement and hope. Finally, with the last donut placed, she locked the door behind her and rushed to the bus stop. Once she reached the apartment complex, she rushed up the stairs to her room. Her closet was a whirlwind of color and fabric as she searched for the perfect outfit. After what felt like an eternity, she settled on a simple black dress that hugged her curves just right, with a touch of lace around the neckline that added a hint of elegance. Her tail swished with excitement as she slipped on a pair of heels that made her feel a couple of inches closer to Alfie's height. The clock ticked away, each second feeling like an eternity. She applied a dab of her favorite scent, a seductive blend of brimstone and vanilla, and took one last look in the mirror. Her horns had a gloss to them she hadn't noticed before, and her eyes shone with an excitement that seemed to light up the room. As the hour approached, the doorbell finally rang, sending a jolt of energy through her. She took a deep breath and opened the door. He wore a crisp shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a pair of jeans that hugged him just right. In his hand was a small bouquet of flowers, their colors a stark contrast to his usual attire. They both exited the apartment and made their way downstairs to Alfie's car, which was parked out front. The ring station was tucked away downtown, serving as the only way of getting over to Pride. When they arrived and both exited the vehicle, Rue noticed that Alfie's stride was a bit quicker than usual, a spring in his step that matched her own excitement. The two imps rushed over to catch the next cue, hand in hand. It was still unknown how technology such as this made it possible to travel through all the rings in hell, but it proved useful to all Hellborn who wished to use it. There were talks of Wrath making a railroad system that could provide an alternate means of travel, but the project seemed too massive to undergo. Arriving in Pride, they stepped out of the elevator and were met with the lobby. Since Pride was the central hub, it was the busiest out of every ring. Rue clung on to Alfie tightly, visibly anxious about how crowded it was. Alfie glanced over to her and gave a reassuring grin. She eased her nerves and gave him a nod. They caught a cab outside and he gave directions to the driver. The restaurant was tucked away in a corner, a cozy little place with a neon sign that read, "The Inferno Bistro." The windows were steamed up, hinting at the warmth and comfort inside. The host led them to a table for two near the back. The dim lighting cast a warm glow over everything, making Rue feel like they were in a secret garden rather than in the heart of hell. Alfie held out her chair, a gesture that made her heart flutter again. As they sat down, the smell of garlic and melted cheese wafted over from the kitchen, making her stomach growl. "I already ordered us an appetizer. The mozzarella sticks here are to die twice for." Rue giggled, feeling both nervous and excited. "I trust your taste," she replied. Rue loved how Alfie had a way of making everything feel like an adventure, even something as simple as dinner. The waiter took their drink orders with a flourish and went on his way back to the kitchen. Alfie suggested a wine that was supposedly made from the tears of angels who'd fallen from grace. It had a heavenly bouquet and a hint of irony, which he found amusing. Rue went for a more classic choice, a cup of steaming hot chocolate that was said to be made from the very essence of sin itself. As they sipped their drinks, Alfie couldn't help but steal glances at Rue. She looked absolutely radiant in the soft light, her horns casting delicate shadows across her cheeks. The nervous energy of the date was palpable, but it only served to make the moment feel more real. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, and the occasional awkward encounter with a customer that had left them both in fits of laughter. The mozzarella sticks arrived and they both dove in, the cheesy goodness stretching out like molten strings of gold. The crunch of the bread and the satisfying pull of the cheese brought a symphony of flavors that made their eyes roll back in their heads. Alfie just nodded, his mouth too full of deliciousness to respond. As they enjoyed their meal, the conversation continued to flow freely between them. Rue spoke of expanding her bakery and Alfie of his aspirations to manage his record store and start a small label for local demon musicians. With every shared secret, every laugh, the bond between them grew stronger. The main course arrived, a decadent plate of pasta that looked like it had been crafted by the finest chefs. They shared bites, savoring the rich flavors that danced on their tongues. The air was thick with the scent of garlic and tomato sauce, a heavenly aroma that seemed to encapsulate the moment. Between mouthfuls of food, Alfie's gaze kept returning to Rue's, and she felt her heart swell with every look. The restaurant buzzed with the chatter of other patrons, but all Rue heard was Alfie's voice. When the waiter approached with the dessert menu, Alfie leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach. "I'm not sure if I can handle any more." Rue looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "But you can't miss out on dessert. It's the best part of the meal." Alfie pretended to consider her words before grinning. "All right, you win, but only if you share whatever you pick with me." The pages were filled with luscious images of chocolate lava cakes and ice creams of various flavors. Rue's eyes lit up at the sight of a devil's food cake, a tower of dark chocolate layers with a scoop of mint ice cream that looked like it could freeze the fires of hell. "We'll have the devil's food cake," she said with a grin, handing the menu back to the waiter. As they waited for dessert, Alfie reached across the table, taking Rue's hand in his. The simple gesture sent a jolt of excitement through her. "I know we've only known each other for a couple of weeks, but I feel like I've known you forever," he said, his voice earnest. Rue felt her heart flutter again, her thumb tracing circles on the back of Alfie's hand. "I know what you mean," her voice barely above a whisper. The dessert arrived. The mint ice cream looked like a small iceberg in a sea of chocolate sauce. They both stared at it for a moment, the anticipation building. Alfie picked up his fork and took a bite, the mint and chocolate mixing in a delightful dance on his tongue. He closed his eyes and sighed in pleasure. "This is so flippin' good," he murmured. Rue couldn't help but laugh at Alfie's expression. It was priceless. She took a bite herself, the cool mint contrasting with the warm, rich chocolate. It was heavenly, the perfect end to a perfect meal. They took turns feeding each other, the sweetness of the dessert mirroring the sweetness of the moment. Every touch of the fork to her mouth sent a jolt of excitement through her, and she felt her cheeks growing warmer. Before they knew it, the empty plate was now a reminder of the deliciousness they'd shared. So Alfie signaled for the check, and they relaxed in their seats, taking in the atmosphere around them. As they left the restaurant, the cool evening air hit them, a stark contrast to the warmth of their meal. Alfie took Rue's hand, and they strolled down the neon-lit streets of Pride, their laughter echoing through the cobblestone alleyways. He took her to a small park, complete with a large fountain in the middle with a statue of Lucifer at the top. The pentagram in the sky cast a soft glow over the scene, making it feel almost romantic. They sat down on a bench, the sound of the fountain's water gently splashing a soothing background to their conversation. Alfie's hand found its way to Rue's. She looked up at Alfie, her eyes filled with a softness that made him feel like he was melting. He leaned in closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The kiss was slow, gentle, and filled with the promise of something more. The sweetness of the dessert still lingered on their lips, making the moment feel like a perfect blend of love and temptation. The sound of the fountain became a symphony of whispers, the glow of the pentagram above them a spotlight on their special night. It was a kiss that seemed to hold the weight of every unspoken word, every shared smile, and every moment they'd spent together.